My brother betrayed me by getting my fiancée pregnant before our wedding, and now my family demands my forgiveness. I left them all behind without looking back. The moment Sarah sat me down, her hands trembling, I could already feel the weight of the truth in the air. I watched as tears filled her eyes, and my heart dropped into my stomach. The words that followed were a punch to the gut, as if the very foundation of my world was being torn apart. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice barely audible, and my mind raced with the thought of the future we had planned together. But then came the words that shattered everything. "It's not yours, it's Mike's." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. For a moment, everything stood still, as if the world around me had collapsed. My chest tightened, and I felt as if I was sinking into an abyss. Mike, my own brother, own flesh and blood, had done this. I had trusted him, even though the distance between us had always been there. But to betray me like this? To take the woman I loved and destroy everything we had? It was beyond comprehension. I couldn't even process the rawness of her confession, the way she explained it as if it was just some mistake, some momentary lapse in judgment. She told me it started at our engagement party, when Mike had planted seeds of doubt in her mind, making her question everything about our future. He had played on her insecurities, making her feel as though she could do better than me. It wasn't just a slip-up. It was months of manipulation, months of deceit. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers. But all I could do was sit there in stunned silence, my heart in pieces, feeling as though the entire life I had built with Sarah had evaporated in an instant. And Mike, my brother, he wasn't just a traitor, he was a destroyer of everything I had ever loved. My blood boiled as I dialed Mike's number. My hands were shaking, the anger and pain mingling inside me like a storm ready to explode. When he answered, his voice was casual, almost too calm for someone who had just destroyed my life. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded, my voice cracking with the weight of betrayal. He tried to brush it off like it was nothing more than a drunken mistake, a one-off. But I saw red. "You don't get to play it off like that. You took everything from me. You took her." Mike's defense faltered when I pressed harder. His words became more defensive, twisted in an attempt to justify what he'd done. And then, in the most twisted move of all, he said, "Well, maybe if you were a better fiancé, she wouldn't have come to me." Those words hit me like a slap across the face. The audacity, the coldness, the complete lack of remorse. I snapped. I hung up and got into my car, my hands gripping the wheel as I drove to his apartment. My heart pounded in my chest, the pain of the betrayal threatening to consume me. But when I arrived, our parents were already there. I knew this was going to be worse than I ever imagined. The moment I stepped into my parents' house, I could feel the tension thick in the air. My mother's face was flushed with frustration, her eyes wide with the kind of pleading I had seen so many times before. "You need to forgive him," she insisted, her voice shaky but firm, as if she was speaking to a child instead of her grown son. "Mike's your brother. Family is everything. You can't just walk away from him." My father stood behind her, arms crossed, disappointment radiating from his expression. There was no hint of anger, only an overwhelming sense of betrayal. And I realized then, in that moment, just how deeply ingrained their favoritism for Mike ran. I felt the familiar frustration bubble up within me, the years of being dismissed and overlooked by them, and it boiled over. "You've never once had my back." I shot back, my voice trembling with emotion. "For years, you've chosen him over me, every single time. And now you want me to forgive him for destroying my life?" My words hung heavy in the room, but they didn't seem to land. My parents, oblivious to the depth of the wound they had helped create, kept pushing. "He made a mistake, son. It's a family matter. He's still your brother." The anger that had been building in me for so long erupted in a way I hadn't expected. I told them point blank that Mike was no longer my brother. I told them that they could have the son they always wanted, because it wasn't going to be me anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's eyes welled up with tears, and my father's disappointed gaze burned into me. But I didn't flinch. I had made my choice. The pain was unbearable as I sat there, the words from Sarah's trembling lips echoing in my mind. "It's Mike. He's the father. My world, which had seemed so certain just hours ago, shattered in an instant. I had always believed in us, in the love we shared, in the future we had so carefully planned together. But now, those dreams felt like a cruel joke. How could this happen? How could the woman I trusted, the one I had promised my life to, betray me with the one person who should have had my back? The suffocating weight of betrayal pressed down on me, suffusing every thought with anger, confusion, and disbelief. I walked out, leaving my family behind for good. The weight of it was crushing, but the sense of freedom, of finally breaking away, was intoxicating. I could feel the walls closing in on me. It was as if the entire world had conspired to force me back into the suffocating embrace of a family that had never really seen me. No matter how far I tried to run, they found a way to pull me back, like I was a puppet on a string. After the confrontation, they continued to invade my life, sending endless messages, showing up at my apartment uninvited, pleading for me to forgive Mike and Sarah. The calls didn't stop. My mother would leave desperate voicemail after voicemail, crying about how I was tearing the family apart, about how this isn't how families work. But the more they pushed, the more I felt like I was drowning. They couldn't comprehend the depth of the betrayal, couldn't understand how their blind loyalty to Mike had destroyed everything I had built. And each time they reached out, each time they guilt-tripped me, it felt like they were ripping my soul open again, picking at the raw wound that had barely begun to heal. The pain of losing Sarah and Mike was unbearable. But the betrayal of my family, the people I had always tried to please, was more crushing than anything I could have imagined. I made up my mind then, this time. I would not give in. I couldn't keep running back to them, hoping for a miracle that would fix everything. The decision wasn't easy. My entire life had been tied up in this family, in these people. But I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for them. I packed up my things and moved, no goodbyes, no explanations, just a quiet, determined escape. I couldn't live in the shadow of their manipulation any longer. This was my chance to take control, to finally breathe again. And yet, even as I drove away, a part of me screamed in protest. But it was too late. I was done. The days that followed were a blur. I had cut ties with everyone, my family, Sarah, Mike, and yet the weight of the betrayal still clung to me like a dark cloud. It was as if I had left behind more than just people. I had left behind a version of myself. I thought moving away would be a fresh start, but the pain, the anger, and the confusion followed me. It was hard to find peace in the quiet, in the new space I had carved out for myself. The absence of chaos should have felt like relief, but it only reminded me of everything I had lost. But as I started to settle into my new life, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, I began to feel a sense of clarity. The rage that had consumed me slowly began to ebb, replaced by something far more powerful: freedom. I wasn't shackled to a family that had failed me, and I wasn't drowning in the weight of betrayal anymore. I could breathe again. I started focusing on myself, for once on healing, on rebuilding. I found solace in simple things. Morning runs, the calm of a cup of coffee in the silence of my new apartment. The idea of living life on my terms, without constantly looking over my shoulder. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't immediate, but with each passing day, I felt the burden lifting. I was no longer a victim of their choices. I was finally starting to live for me. And for the first time in a long while, I could actually feel hope creeping back in. In that moment, I felt a cold, numbing emptiness wash over me. The joy I had once felt was replaced with a sharp, aching void, a hollow space where love had once resided. How many times had I stood by Sarah, made her feel safe, secure, loved, and yet she chose him. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, my heart racing and my hands trembling, as I tried to make sense of what was happening. My brother, my flesh and blood, how could he do this to me? And Sarah, the woman I was supposed to marry, the woman who had shared my future dreams, had torn it all apart. The anger burned like a wildfire, but so did the sadness, threatening to drown me. How could everything I believed in, everything I trusted, crumble so quickly? Growing up, I always knew I was different. My brother Mike was the golden child in the eyes of our parents. No matter what he did, he could do no wrong. When he broke something, I was blamed. When he started a fight, I was grounded. Our parents, Tom and Linda, never hesitated to put the weight of responsibility on my shoulders, always reminding me that I was the older one, that I should set an example. Meanwhile, Mike's misdeeds were brushed aside, explained away with excuses like, "He's younger, he needs more attention," or "You should know better." I tried to be the good son, always doing what I was supposed to, but it never seemed to matter. As we grew older, this favoritism only intensified. When I earned a scholarship to a good college, my parents barely acknowledged it. But when Mike decided to go to a community college, they threw him a lavish celebration. They even bought him a car. Meanwhile, I was left to bike 5 miles each way to my part-time job. The frustration I felt then only deepened with each passing year. No matter how much I worked or achieved, nothing was ever enough to earn their approval. Mike dropped out of college after 1 semester, and instead of criticism, he was praised for knowing himself. I, on the other hand, was constantly reminded of my shortcomings. It became clear that no matter what I did, I was never going to be good enough for them, and yet I still tried. I still reached out to Mike, trying to salvage some semblance of brotherhood between us, even though it always felt like a one-sided effort. He ignored me, or worse, made everything into a game where he always won. I was always left on the sidelines, invisible in my own family. It hurt more than I ever let on. It was supposed to be the beginning of everything I had ever dreamed of. Sarah was everything I had hoped for, in a partner beautiful, intelligent, and kind. When we first met, it felt like magic. I had never felt this way about anyone, and for the first time in my life, I thought I had found someone who truly valued me. Our relationship grew quickly, and after a year of dating, we moved in together. Every moment felt right, as if everything was falling into place. Sarah and I shared the same vision for the future career, family, and eventually, children. We were a team. I thought I had finally escaped the chaos of my childhood. Here I was, building the life I always wanted. But then, the cracks started to show. It wasn't huge at first, just little things. Sarah seemed distracted, spending more time on her phone, and whenever I asked her about it, she brushed me off. At first, I told myself it was just the stress of planning a wedding, nothing to worry about. But the signs kept piling up. She was out late with her friends more often, and when I asked her about it, she would just dismiss me with a laugh, as if nothing was wrong. I ignored my instincts, not wanting to believe that the woman I was about to marry could be hiding something so devastating. But when I look back, I see the signs now, how she became distant, how she was always on her phone, always smiling at texts from business friends. I trusted her. I believed in her, but I should have seen it coming. I should have known better than to ignore the gut-wrenching feeling that something was off.